Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. This is Desi Vijay. I'm a North-South National Team member and a coordinator for these webinars. I'm really glad to see you all here in an all-important webinar. And I'm also hoping that you're enjoying the summer, at least the last few days of the summer. Today, we are revisiting an important topic that's very near and dear to all our heart. We really are pleased to have a panelist of very young and energetic first generation Americans assembled here today to share their views, experiences, and then word of wisdom too. I'm really glad that we are able to make this happen today, and welcome to yet another exciting webinar session. Some of the past webinars are also available in our North-South YouTube channel. You can search for it. Please subscribe to that YouTube channel, and then you can watch a lot of old ones. If you want to listen to any of the old previous webinars, please let us know at webinars@northsouth.org. For the main program, Bridging the Generation Gap, Younger Generation Speaks, I really would like to first invite our North-South Foundation President, Dr. Balu Natarajan, whom we all know very well and dear to us. He has been spearheading so many of these initiatives and activities, and I would really request him to come on board and then introduce our distinguished moderator and the panels of today's discussion. Dr. Balu.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay. It's a treat to be here and really excited to have this important discussion coming up. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Prasad Kaipa. He probably doesn't need an introduction, especially at North-South. He's been speaking for us so much, especially over the last year and a half. Dr. Prasad Kaipa lives in Silicon Valley, is an advisor, a professor, a coach, and a speaker, and an author. He's a former fellow at Apple University, and he has developed leadership and executive strategies for Fortune 100 companies. You already knew this, but he's super smart. He holds a PhD in physics from IIT Madras, and I'm really excited that he's going to lead us through this. So Dr. Kaipa, please take it from here.
Thank you, Dr. Balu. Actually, all my work is evolving from the physics that I learned in IIT Madras. And what is interesting about today's panel is, it took me so many years to get master's, PhD, and then so much of other kinds of learning to be in Apple or be a professor. But just when my children were born, suddenly I'm a parent, and there were no instruction manuals, nor there were any kind of classes, parenting classes that were appropriate. And especially because we have been in the United States and bridging the gap between Indian culture and American culture and being parents, I think we have all done what we could from our own perspective, our own experiences. Today's seminar is about recognizing that as first generation Indian Americans and as second generation Indian Americans, we are all learning together. We are all actually trying to figure out the best way we can be as parents, as well as second generation Indian Americans. So this seminar, especially when we talk to the younger people, it is not about when they make comments, when they tell stories, it is not about there is something inherently wrong or there is something inherently inappropriate in what parents or children are doing in terms of bridging, but it is more about identifying whether there are ways in which we can accelerate the relationship. And today's topic is especially focused on communication. If we want to increase between the second generation and first generation, what are some specific concrete experiences that these panelists have gone through, and what is the impact of those on themselves? They are sharing it not because they want to find faults, but because they are sharing it in such a way other parents and other youngsters can learn from it and can actually reduce the amount of stress and trauma so that we can communicate and develop the love and affection that we have among each other to next level. So just want to keep it in mind that nobody takes anything personal, or nobody makes, if somebody says something about their relationships, doesn't mean they are making them wrong. That is extremely important so that you don't take it personal. This is for learning purpose. So let me introduce the panelists who have generously taken time to come on board and help us out to share their perspectives. Shivam Gandhi is a computational biologist at Mass General Hospital. He has a degree in mathematics and a computer science from Brown University. And he really is very passionate about reading and writing about psychology, meditation, and personal growth. And we are really glad that he has he's really being a participant and a panelist today to share his views. Next, we have Dr. Yashu Rao, who has received a PhD from material, in the, let's say, material science and engineering from University of Florida. I wanted to see whether I should talk about nuclear engineering or material science, but the broader sense is material science is the subject from University of Florida. She has a lot of passion for STEAM education, and she has multiple roles she has played. She is a published plus size South Indian American model, confidence and lifestyle coach, public speaker, and she has been featured on multiple media platforms for her efforts in the body positivity movement and mental health advocacy, especially for the Indian American community. She is also an entrepreneur with her own media company, AYR, AYR, specializing in fashion, music, media education, and production. So we are glad to have you on the panel, Yashu. Welcome. The third panelist we have is Haripriya Mehta. She graduated from MIT in 4 years with both bachelor's and master's in electrical engineering and computer science and a minor in music. She did award-winning research while she was at MIT in machine learning, and she was the president of the MIT Society for Women Engineers organization. She currently is working for Amazon, and she's co-founder of Mehta Plus, where she and her brother trains the next generation of engineers through computational boot camps and workshops for high school and middle school students. Thanks for all your work, and welcome to the panel, Haripriya. And then we have Sravya Vaimulapati, who has bachelor's and master's in computational area, and she works as the information technology consultant. And she has grown up in Bay Area, India, and currently in Dallas. And she has been very passionate about both cultures after growing up in both Indian and American cultures. She is a volunteer for Yuvagana in the Samskrita Bharati, and she is a Karyakarta doing a lot of programs for the youth through Samskrita Bharati. And we are very happy to have Sravya. Welcome to the panel. So I thought what we could do is we could get each of them sharing their perspectives for about 5 minutes each. I'll let you know when your time is up, and if you like a 1 minute warning, but generally please take it away. If you can do it in the same order, that will be great. After that, we will have some questions for panelists, and they may have questions for each other, and then we will take your questions, and that's the agenda today. All right, Shivam, please.
Thank you for giving me the chance to speak here. My name is Shivam Gandhi. I am a Brown Math and Computer Science graduate. I do computational biology research at Mass General Hospital. On top of that, I also help lead a men's team, which is a personal development group for men. And I've given talks on recovery and mental health at adult children of alcoholics and other groups. I also love writing about personal growth and mental health, and I go to therapy. So here's my story, and it's a bit heavy at times, so I'll throw a trigger warning out there. I grew up in an environment where nothing less than an A was acceptable. I was usually terrified to bring home my report card, and there was this website called Aspen where you could check the grades, and I always was worried that my mom would be checking it the day like a test came out, and I'd come home and I'd be screwed. I was also compared to other kids in both the academic sense and in terms of why are you not a good Indian son sense, and those words really left deep scars. There's also a lot of shouting and name calling at my home. So it was a pretty tumultuous home life. And I did do well in high school, and I went to a school that I really liked for college. And I thought I'd just be smooth sailing. I'd become a really good like mathematician and physicist or something like that. And I started off college in a pretty good manner. I took some tough courses, but pretty soon I found that I felt like I was a one-dimensional person. I didn't know how to connect with other people, and I became quite depressed. And most of my college actually was quite tumultuous. I didn't really go to class, and I didn't do too well. I was more just trying to figure out what was going on in my head and what I really wanted out of life, because I was just discovering all these parts of myself that I'd shut away for so long. In fall of 2019, I had a bit of a mental breakdown. I needed to go to an outpatient psychiatric program, and honestly, this fall of 2019 incident kind of highlights to me how important this stuff is, because I'm going to be honest, during that time, I had pretty intense suicidal ideations. I dealt with self-harm, and it was a very dark time. So I started doing therapy at about that time, and pretty soon I got a diagnosis of complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So there was quite a bit going on, but that complex PTSD diagnosis helped explain why I had so many struggles in the areas of relationship, focus, just knowing what I wanted out of life, why I had such a dark mindset. So that's when my recovery also began. And while my story may have been quite dark up until then, it's more and more every day it's becoming a story of hope. And it's really shown me that recovery is possible and healthy relationships are possible. So I started doing this therapy called EMDR, which is specifically for post-traumatic stress disorder. Building a good relationship with my therapist was super crucial in me healing. I also started going to the men's team, which I now help lead, and I was able to establish healing relationships there. A big thing that I practice is called nonviolent communication. It's learning how to tap into my own needs, my feelings, and communicate them in an effective, assertive, but respectful manner. I also instilled a growth mindset. I learned to take things one step at a time and celebrate the small wins, because I realized that I had adopted a very abusive mindset towards myself. The inner critic would just go rampant every time I would try to sit down to work. I would talk to somebody, he'd call me, "You're a loser, you're an idiot, nobody wants to talk to you." I learned to undo that programming. Now I'm quite kind to myself internally. Still have little kinks that I'm ironing out. It's a daily practice, but things have gotten much better. And honestly, I think the most important thing has been recognizing the unique good in myself and not comparing myself to others. I realize that I have great qualities, and the fact that other people have great qualities doesn't take away from who I am. I'm a good person, and my academic achievement is secondary. I try and live a good life, a virtuous life. I try and be kind to people. And I believe it's that my striving for personal growth is more important than any academic achievement that I've gotten at this point. And this is what I've now built my life around, and it's built so much hope, and I feel like I'm able to give back now because I'm in such a stable place. So what I really hope to communicate is that despite all the darkness that I went through, there is a lot of light, and the important things that I feel are good practices for establishing good relationships, which have also helped me like build a really solid relationship with my partner and have much closer friendships and reestablish my relationship with my sister, is nonviolent communication. This centers around recognizing our own feelings and needs, and also recognizing the feelings and needs of others and communicating that in an assertive but respectful manner. There's actually a book called Nonviolent Communication, and it should be included in the document that is sent out for this webinar. The second most important thing I realize is that not every kid needs to be an academic star. academics are important. And I really believe that they're a good testing ground for us to build good virtues of hard work, persistence. I do believe that learning is a constant thing and should be done every day. But we should also emphasize that and allow for individuality of others. My sister, for example, she never loved math as much as I did. And unfortunately, that wasn't valued in my household. And at the time, it was like, okay, I thought math was everything. But now, years later, I'm realizing that like relationships are so important. And frankly, my sister's so much more intelligent on that front than I am. Like, I feel like I started my recovery process early, but she's known about all this stuff since day one. She's been so much more emotionally intelligent than I have. And she's really helped me grow in so many ways. And I believe that these are also super important skills. And really, like, I really believe that love is the most important thing in our life. And love involves seeing the other person exactly for who they are and not projecting what we need them to be onto them. So we need to be able to recognize the individuality of like each child in our community and really help them grow, help nurture them, as opposed to forcing them to be something that they may not be. And really,
Thank you, Shivam.
all this has to be taken one step at a time. Results can't come tomorrow. And honestly, I believe that we shouldn't be attached to results. We should focus on the here and now and try and make the best of the present. In the Bhagavad Gita, they talk about karma yoga, which is the idea of unattachment to outcome. And I think that is something that needs to be practiced by us, which is, I felt it was ironic that that wasn't practiced in my household, that there was such an attachment to getting an A, getting into an Ivy League, and all of that. I think there's much wisdom that our culture holds. It's time we tap into it and treat the children in our community in a way that really reflects that. So I do believe that there's lots of hope, and with nonviolent communication, recognizing each person's individuality and being patient and taking things one step at a time, we can really create a great community. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shivam. I think it is wonderful that with all the trauma that you have gone through, you have found a way to look at things positively and create a more powerful communication. And how academic achievement is extraordinarily important, but along with that, proper communication, emotional intelligence, and how we are communicating to our children and how they take responsibility and ownership for it is critical. That comes through. So while Shivam focused on academic achievement and positive and negative, how to communicate that, Yashu, if you can talk about your experience and some of the passionate topics that you have taken on and what got you to that place. Why are you so passionate about plus size and some of the issues? Can you share your experience, please?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Kaipa. And again, thank you, Shivam, for sharing that. I know that is a topic that many people can relate to. I myself can relate to the academic pressures of being a Desi child. But I want to, yes, take this in a completely different direction for a moment and just talk about body positivity. And that does not only mean being plus size, that means having darker complexion, maybe balding, having excessive hair growth, anything, right? I feel that, growing up, I am a plus size woman, and I have always been a big girl, even from a very young age. I always say, like, Mom, when I was born, I was a 10-pound baby. Like, I was a big person always. And we have these very Eurocentric beauty standards engraved in the Indian culture right now. We see this reflected in media, cinema, right? We're very particular that women need to be skinny, they have to have certain dimensions to their body. Men have to be tall, men have to have broad shoulders, men have to be fair-skinned, women have to be fair-skinned. We have all of these things, and sometimes we know that those are not okay, especially when they're our own kids and they might be darker complexion. We think like, oh, that's not okay. But we're also the same hypocritical people who say, oh, well, she's dark skinned too, so let's not get you married there, right? So we see this happening a lot. It's almost like we want the best for our kid. However, that best for our kid could actually be not so good. So just to talk a little bit about, me and my upbringing, like Dr. Kaipa said, I want to say that everything that my parents have done for me was out of the most affection and love ever that a parent can give, right? Nowhere is there ill intention for my parents, right? My parents did what they thought was the best way to parent, and I respect and I love them for that. But at the same time, there's this concept called dialectical thinking that we talk a lot about in cognitive thinking and cognitive therapy. And with dialectical thinking, we're able to accept two realities or multiple realities, right? So as an example, my mother and father love me so much. They have sacrificed so much for me, but they are also hurting me. They are also emotionally scarring me. And for the longest time, accepting both of these realities was hard. I would carry so much guilt. 28 years of my life, I carried guilt because deep inside, I felt like I wasn't being treated nicely or fairly. But I knew, but they're doing this with love. I would remember days that I would be, I'd have a plate of idli, which is a Indian meal, which I hope many people know, right? They're little rice cakes. And my mom would, maybe put 2 on the plate for me, and I would go for grabbing for the 3rd one, and my mom would just take my plate away. Or I would be at a relative's house and they would give me 4 and I would be eating, and after 2, my mom would just take my plate away. And it wasn't because she was trying to hurt me or trying to do something bad. It was because in her heart, it was like, oh, well, my baby is big, and later in her life, people are going to not like her. It's going to be hard to get her married. Like all of these thoughts for her. And this kind of goes into mothering versus smothering, right, that we talk about. And I think that that is such an important concept. Again, you're coming from a space of love and appreciation, and that's so important. But at the same time, is this negatively impacting your child? It would create frustration for me. It would create, internal, like, why is my mom so mean to me? And it's not just our parents. I think another very important thing to address is the toxicity of our relatives, and especially those who may be back in India, right? Who may not be aware of the way we're raised here. I like to make a very important statement that if you are ABCD, American born, confused Desi, if you are from here, I was born and raised here, we grow up with a very sensitive mindset, a sensitive mindset that people in India are not raised with. So for example, we see cinema. Often they make jokes about being fat. There are movies revolving around the fact that someone is fat and they should just reject that woman, or they make her into the comedian in the movie, right? But such humor in the US, especially if you say it with your friends or something, is not taken the same way. We're kind of conditioned here to actually take that to heart and feel bad about it. And that could be the complexion too. Like, how many times has cinema made fun of people who have darker complexion? And as a result, we see people trying to bleach their skin or try to change who they are. So I think it's important to address that, especially when we have relatives who may not be aware of the American rhetoric or be aware of the way that we're raised here of thinking. It can be toxic. I remember that my family members in India would say, oh, Yashu, like, stop eating cheese and burgers. And I said, well, first of all, I'm lactose intolerant, so I don't even eat cheese. And second of all, I'm vegetarian. Like, we come from a, for example, Brahmin family. My parents raised me vegetarian. I've never eaten meat in my life, right? This is not for me. I don't eat burgers. And on top of that, because of this fear, my mother never took us out. We never really went out. If we went for pizza, my mom would say, you can have only 1 slice. You cannot have more than 1 slice. That's the way I grew up. So for my relatives in India to assume that all I eat is cheese and burgers was conflicting to me. Later in my life, it came to a point that if I would call my relatives, they would say, hey, what did you eat today? And I would have to lie. I couldn't tell them, oh, well, I had rice and sambar. I had to lie and say, I had 2 pulka and a little bit of rajma. That's all I had. I had to lie about what I was eating, even though I was eating healthy, right? And I think that's also something important. You raise us to be Indian, and my comfort food, my mom always used to make rice and some other dishes. At least now I'm able to supplement my food with like salads and this and that. And so for me, it was definitely a conflict. Even with like working out, they have an assumption. A lot of times you have an assumption that because I'm a big person that I'm not actively taking care of my body, which is not even true. At one point of my life, I used to work out 6 hours a day, 6 hours a day. And I lost no more than about 1 to 2 pounds after doing this regimen for like a year and a half. And I talked to an internal medicinalist, I talked to a dietitian, I talked to so many people because I was sick and tired, not of myself or my body, but I was sick and tired of all of the cultural implications that were coming out of just being a big-bodied woman. And my doctor said, Yashu, you're a dancer, you're very active, you're a soccer player, you're very active, you run, you jog, you work out at the gym, you do yoga, you do all of these things, you eat healthy, you are a healthy person. So don't let other people impact the way you're leading your healthy lifestyle. Just continue it. And that's why I really chose to be a lifestyle coach as well, because now I'm able to supplement people with the confidence of saying, hey, well, this is my active lifestyle. I'm doing everything I can to lead a healthy life. So now when people talk about me, I'm not able to feel so bad about it. But I think the most important thing is the whole concept of marriage. And I'll end with this because I know it's a topic that many people can relate to as well. When marriage becomes a topic in your household and you are not according to these Eurocentric beauty standards, it definitely becomes tough. I've had relatives tell me, well, whether he has a leg or not, or he's deaf or whatever, it doesn't matter. Just marry someone. So to me, my doctorate, my accomplishments, me having magazine spreads as a model, anything, none of this matters. I am big, so I'm unworthy of having a completely normal partner, a partner that I choose to be with, right? And these dialogues are hard. And even with people who grow up with these parents who are teaching, are you a parent who's teaching your child to believe in Eurocentric beauty standards? Because I have experienced their sons, right? Their sons who still might grow up here in America, or they might be from India. I know when my parents brought some alliances, I had a man tell me, you're so ugly, and that's your past life karma, but it's okay. I'll still marry you because you're going to get a doctorate and I can still show you off. I've had some mother's son, some father's son tell me, you're so ugly. What is your worth? You don't belong on this earth. I have had people tell me this. This abusive nature has come from this one concept of meeting these Eurocentric beauty standards, which are not even true to our culture, right? So at the end of the day, I think my advice or my honest opinion or ways that we can go about it is being able to do as much as you can for your child to support their healthy growth or support them in who they are. If there's truly a medical condition, of course, you have to do what you got to do about that. But if it comes something to like complexion or just being a big person, teach your child to respect him or herself, as well as teaching them that that's important so that when they grow up, right, don't be that son who told me you're worthless, Yashu, right? Don't raise your kids to be that. Raise your kids to be, this is an amazing woman, this is an amazing man. And just because his complexion is different or just because this person is big does not make him any less qualified, does not make her any less qualified of receiving love and being part of the family.
Thank you. That's wonderful, Yashu. That is what you are saying really goes to the heart. How many of us unconsciously and in a subconscious way, we have internalized some of the things we hear. Of course, it also doesn't just necessarily mean big, but also it could be small. Like my daughter is, like a 5'2" or 5'3". Actually, she will kill me if I say 5'2". And she's small and she's 30 years old and she looks like 15. And so many times that is also a problem. You are right. I think what are our unconscious set of beliefs and values that we have internalized from the community and society, and we are unable to express our love without having to bring in these filters. I think that is something you are saying. Pay attention to what are you communicating, what actions are you taking, because your actions speak louder than your words. Excellent point. Let's hear who would like to go first, Haripriya or Sravya? If you can build on what Yashu said, we can take it from there. I'm curious. Either one of you have a preference? No?
Anything
Okay, go
is
ahead.
fine.
Go ahead, Sravya.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe we'll have a very different story from Haripriya, so it will be nice to hear from Sravya as well.
Okay, thank you.
Please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sravya. Thank you so much for having me on this panel today. All of these stories were so relatable, especially things that Yashu just talked about. Like, I have an extremely hairy, super hairy arms and legs, and and that's something that people used to call you out for, especially like when I was very young, like 7, 8, 9, and Indian parents and Indian moms would come out and be like, "Oh, why are your arms so hairy?" And I'm like, I was born like that, So I could really relate to everything that we talked about so far. Um, this is my first time sharing my experience on a public forum, and I'm still navigating my situation. But I hope there is something valuable that I can share with you all. So actually, just yesterday, I got this revelation, this true understanding of what it means to be like Indian American. And I'll share a little bit about that. But just as a background, my parents moved to the United States when I was like 3. I've lived in California for like 12 years, went to high school in India actually, and came back for college with my family.
Can you all mute? Excuse me. Can everybody else mute other than the speaker, please? Thank you. And there is a document that is coming up. Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Please continue.
So a good part of my life was spent in the States. However, I've always felt like I was more on the Indian side. My parents are very traditional and very culture oriented and would take us to India every single summer. And I had the good fortune of having a very, very strong connection with my maternal grandparents, and thus like a very strong connection with the culture as well. And whenever we were in India, my parents would give us the real deal. We always went in like local trains, local transportation, had like all the street food, because they never wanted us, like my younger brother or I, to know that, they wanted us to know that we didn't get any special passes for, living outside of India. But of course it was never enough for my cousins, for my uncles, or for my aunts, because they used to always give us flack for acting special all the time, even though we never did. And I should have learned back then that no matter what I did, I wouldn't ever be able to remove like the American from my label or from my identity. That is just what I was, right? And no matter how local I tried to be, they were never going to accept me because that is who I am. But I never understood that. Because to me, I knew that I didn't fit in well with my American peers because there was just something so fundamentally different about my thinking. I still had and still have this really strong Indian psychological training stuck in my head. Things like, oh, we have to respect our elders no matter what happens, or we have to go out of our way to fulfill expectations because family and extended family is what really, really matters. And that like the dharma of being a child is to fulfill your parents' expectation is like very strongly instilled in our head. And as a result, I never learned what it means to draw boundaries. And that is now like showing up now, I guess. So, and additionally, I think that as the eldest daughter in a Brown household, I took on like much greater emotional responsibility to ensure that my mother didn't have to confront any difficult situations, whether it was her own personal battles or her like familiar relationships or flack for what I had done or anything like that. So it was like I always tried my best. I was like always on my toes, always trying to like pre-comprehend, pre-assess situations and like act or adjust accordingly. And I almost like started to develop this sort of like savior complex, because I just always needed to feel like I could save the situation or make sure that the other person didn't feel uncomfortable. But to be really honest, I think I like owned that, and I did it for a reason. I was okay with all of that happening because internally I think I hoped that if and when the day came where I crossed the cultural line for any reason, my family and like my extended family, they would understand and they would be like, oh, well, this girl has her cultural grounding, yet she decided to make a slightly different decision. Well, let's ask her why, or let's walk through that, you know, thought process with her. But long story short, that's apparently not how things work at all. So even though I felt like I was so Indian and like completely felt like I understood the Indian psyche so well, I realized like almost literally last night that I will never understand. I will never be just Indian. I don't know why it took me 25 years to accept that, but there are always going to be things that are a bigger deal for my parents than they are going to be to me, and there are always going to be things that I think are more important for, and to them they might just be like, oh, like why do you care about that? And I may have like the culture education, but I don't have the same environment. I wasn't raised in the same environment, and that wasn't my choice to be born or raised where I was. And I don't have the same life experiences, right? And Indians have this concept of jati, right? And well, to put it in those terms, we American children are our own jati, right? We can't and won't ever be able to understand the world like Indian parents do. And you can't compare us to people out of our jati. Like I cannot be compared to my cousins in India, no matter how culturally grounded I am, because I'm in fact a mixed jati. I'm like, that's what ABCD means, right? So and I think we have this like very animalistic instinct of wanting our offspring to start off with the learnings of the past generation and to like keep up the best practices and traditions and rituals and all of that. But we're also human, right? And there's this concept of swadharma and swabhava. And I think that Indian parents especially have to realize that they got 16, 18, or 20 years to raise their kids under their rules and their ideologies and expectations. But after a point, you have to let them go. And, you know, and the whole concept of like parents just being the guardians of these like little people, and then at one point letting them go to live their own destiny. And of course, you can be there to support them, but, you know, we have to understand our own swadharma based on what our swabhava is. And I think that's really important that we tap into that part of our culture. So I just wanted to say that, you know, never, I think one advice or one thing that always comes to my mind is please never let your kids feel like they need to pick between you and the other thing, because that is the worst thing you can do for their mental health and for their future. Because if your child picks the other thing, well, they've lost you forever. I mean, even if the communication still remains, the trust that they've had in that relationship is broken, right? And you're never going to get that back. And if your child picks you over the other thing, you've lost them forever, because the negative associations that forced sacrifice like has caused in them, that burden will remain on that relationship for as long as it's alive. So if I could urge my parents to do something differently, it would be to go out of their comfort zone and to interact with people and situations that we as Indian Americans go through. And that can in fact be with other Indian American parents as well. Have an open dialogue, right? And I feel like our community is so quick to compare and shame that we tend not to reach out to others in our community to, you know, to have an open dialogue, to learn and to understand what they're going through with their kids, you know, like, and have that community support. So I say open the dialogue, and I think we need safe spaces for our parents to navigate their feelings and their challenges so that consequently they feel equipped to help their children.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for wonderful insights. All the three of you have given beautiful perspectives. Shivam from academic perspective, Yashu from the looks and the size and the way in which one does, and you are looking at from the perspective of fitting in the culture, but accepting the self-esteem all the three of you brought about, and what it means to navigate this bridging issue is a complex one. And I'm also interested in listening to Haripriya saying, how did she manage? Because from what I heard, Haripriya, it looks like you have found a way in which there is a beautiful balance between the two perspectives, and you have been able to experience that bridge in your own life. Can you please share your story?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Haripriya. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak today. And I wanted to just thank Shivam, Yashu, and Sravya for being so honest and for sharing your stories. It does take a lot of courage. Like Dr. Kaipa said, I completed my bachelor's and master's in electrical engineering and computer science with a minor in music from MIT in 4 years, and that normally takes 5 to 6 years. I'm a full-time software engineer and also an educator. Along with my brother, I co-founded Mehta Plus Tutoring, where we teach K to 12 students computer science concepts and do college consulting. So I want to go full circle, and I want to focus back on academic and especially academic pressures that students often face from their parents and society. While I have always been fortunate to have an amazing relationship with my parents, who always supported and encouraged me, as an educator who deals with students and parents on a daily basis, I've seen a wide variety of student-parent dynamics. So I wanna start from the beginning. We are a Gujarati family, and my mom was raised in Delhi. So she experienced a very different culture and was cognizant of the alienating feelings of growing up in two different cultures. And here we were, my brother and I, being raised in an entirely different country in America. When my mother was pregnant with me, she listened to talks by Indian and American pediatricians. One talk by American pediatrician T. Barry Breselton stuck with her and altered her and our lives forever. To a group of expectant mothers, Dr. Breselton said, "What do you aspire for your children?" Without skipping a beat, the mother said, "We want them to go to Harvard. We want them to go to Oxford." And he said, "That's interesting. Not one of you said you wanted your child to be happy, to be content." Growing up, that's exactly what my parents wanted for us. They wanted us to be happy. We grew up with the best practices of both the East and the West. My parents never imposed their viewpoints on us. They never compared us with any other student. They treated us as young adults. Communication and democracy were key in our household. Every member of our family could present his or her viewpoint respectfully. Whenever my parents were guiding us, they never said, "Don't do this" or "Don't do that." Instead, they explained to us why they were for or against a certain course of action. But at the end of the day, it was my or my brother's decision to make. Just as Shivam mentioned, we grew up with the Bhagavad Gita verse, "Karmanye vadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana." You have the right to work only, but never to his fruits. And the Sanskrit phrase, Bahuratna Vasundhara. There are many jewels, there are many geniuses on this earth. Grades were not important in my family, but understanding of the concepts was. We always had scope for improvement, and we always had something to learn from others. Whenever my brother and I were learning something, my parents were very involved and would learn with us. My mother would ask us to explain concepts to her. When we were young, she would fake it and act like she wouldn't understand simple concepts in any of the subjects. We would feel so special because we were made to feel that we had the potential to teach someone older than us something. We had to have our concepts crystal clear in order to teach. When we struggled when we first started learning piano and skating, my father learned the treble and bass clefs of Western classical music and put on a pair of skates to help us. As a freshman in high school, if I didn't understand my multivariable calculus or AP biology homework, I would wake up my father at midnight. He would study my textbook and wake me up at 3 a.m. in order to explain the concepts to me. As an educator at Mehta Plus, I worked with all types of students and parents. They were all caring parents, but some of them were tiger parents. Now, contrary to popular belief, not all tiger parents are Asian. What I noticed was that Asian tiger parents often were dismissive of their students' accomplishments and blamed their student when they could not perform. White tiger parents, on the other hand, thought that their students were brilliant and could do no wrong and blamed the teachers when students could not perform. Both types of tiger parents shifted their own responsibility to others. They never asked themselves what they could do to help their children. With the result, their children were very unhappy and did not do so well in my class. Caring parents, on the other hand, just like mine, would ask their students what they learned. They would take interest and help them when the students would struggle. If they could not help, they would reach out to me and ask me for additional resources. Their students were very happy and successful. What I noticed is that tiger parents expect while caring parents respect. As a college consultant, the final thing I sort of want to mention here is that I really have begun to comprehend the structural and systemic racism in America. I have seen so many college admission officers during their presentations jump to the offensive conclusion that my brother or I are considering pursuing an engineering major because our parents have forced us to, when I know that they would have celebrated a white person doing the same and called it following their passion. In the media, there is an overrepresentation of white families. We are conditioned to believe that interpersonal relationships between white parents and their children is an ideal that we all must achieve. Why is this? I find that the love language of Asian parents toward their children is not at all represented in the media, and thus we do not always appreciate it for what it is. As a child of an immigrant and an educator, I think children need to stop succumbing to peer pressure, and parents need to stop following the mentality of log kya kahenge, what will people say? I believe that parents and students must take the time to understand each other's love language and the underlying reasons for our actions. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think there are three things which I am taking away, Haripriya, from what you said for me as a parent myself. So you are saying caring without necessarily scaring kids with our care. So that means we need to take on their love and we need to care about them, but we need to care about who they are as a person, not just their accomplishments. So we need to, if there are problems that children are having academically or something else, you are saying your parents actually became the students before they became the teachers. Like midnight, you told the father he'd spent 3 hours and he got back to you at 3 a.m. First he learning, then he teaching. Second, asking questions and inquiring rather than just giving advice. India is the advice capital of the world. If we all have advice much more than inquiry, I think that is something that you are saying. Maybe we need to ask rather than tell. That is second thing which I'm saying. Third one, which you said also, is about role modeling. So they don't need to force, all of you probably heard the story of a man and his dog, where it seems the dog fell sick and the man was forcing, he puts the dog between his legs and opens the mouth and pours the medicine into the mouth every day. And the dog kicks and screams and struggles every day. But after about 5 days, somehow the dog went a little bit more berserk, and then the bottle fell down and it broke. Then suddenly man was surprised that the dog was going up and licking up all the medicine from the bottle. I think that's when he realized his love and caring for the dog and making sure the dog gets better. Somehow he realized that it is not the medicine that the dog is hating, but it is the way in which the medicine was being given. I'm taking away that from listening to all the four of you. Maybe the way in which I'm parenting, I may have to think about four things from many of them which you talked about. Number one, I need to create a safe space for stress relief and for emotional well-being. That's what I'm taking from Shivam. So if I transfer my intensity, if I try to live through you, what my dreams and some of them, and if I force you academically, high expectations without really engaging you and involving you, I don't create a safe space for you. Second, I think from Yashu's example of idli and some other things, what I'm taking is, I think she used the word, we need to mother them. And we also need to know when we need to stop mothering and we need to become partner, we need to work with it so that we don't smother them with our love. The love and commitment are both equally important. Just love does not necessarily give you the commitment. The third one, when I'm listening to you, Sravya, and from your own perspective, what I took away is that it is extremely important to care, as you can see from the other people, but when you yourself as Sravya, if you take on over caring, if you try to be a mother to your own mother or your own family, if you begin to really take on your cultural, stuff, problem is you don't have a chance to grow yourself. So to a certain extent, as either parents or as children, we begin to overcare, then we can only do it by losing our self-esteem, our self-confidence, and our own identity, that we'll have to take it. So, and the last one, what I got from Haripriya is how to develop sense of self-worth. And as many of you mentioned, the growth mindset. That mindset is an excellent book by Carol Dweck. She's a Stanford University professor. Mindset, it talks about fixed mindset versus growth mindset. I think Haripriya referred to as saying, what are some of the characteristics of learning, lifelong learning? And I think that is referred to by Shivam as well as the other people like Yashu and Sravya as well. How do I focus on your growth, and how do I partner with you rather than looking at myself as a judge and criticize? So I need to learn, maybe hopefully you can take it away as a listener yourself. Maybe you need to be less critical and more joining them, understanding and empathizing and recognizing what problems that they are going through. Okay, now I have a couple of things. Did you want to ask each other any questions? When you heard each other's stories as the panelists, do you have something that you want to clarify or you want to get? And also after that, I would like to check, Balu, you also have a very unique experience of you growing up in the United States and being one of the first North-South Spelling Bee champion, and now you have your own kids. Maybe I should call you like you are a 1.5 generation. In some respects, you are a bridge, and you have been bridging. Maybe you might want to add. And similarly, Savita or Desi, later if you want to add something, please feel free to do that. But first, let me see whether panelists have any questions among themselves or whether they want to learn anything from each other.
I have a question for Sravya. Hi,
Okay.
Sravya. I am able to relate to your story so much because my parents are also very Orthodox. I grew up going to India every summer. And for the biggest time for me, identity was a struggle. I didn't know who I was. I would think I'm Indian for the biggest time, but Indian people wouldn't accept me. Then I would think I'm American, but I didn't really fit in the American culture. So when it comes to your mother or your father, and I guess you talked a lot about your maternal side, so I guess we'll say mother, right? Because I struggle with my relationship with my mother. How do you try to convince them about certain topics? Like I know in my house, if I have an opposing viewpoint, it's immediately dismissed, right? It's like, you don't know what you're talking about. It's almost gaslighting happens, right? Where you're emotionally blackmailing your child, so your child cannot even express themselves. So my first question is, did you see this as a common theme in your household? And if you did, like, did you find ways to combat it?
Thank you for the question, Yashu. It's really ironic because I was going to ask a very similar question to the rest of y'all. So what you said is very true. That sort of gaslighting does happen. I always kind of chose the battles that I, tried to fight, and I would let go of many of the smaller things just because I knew that they would, they wouldn't come through or they wouldn't happen or whatever, and I just didn't want to go through that. And the very few times that I did choose to, that I did, pick the stance and try to go through with it, there was and is a lot of gaslighting and emotional blackmailing, and unfortunately, like I don't know how to deal with that, and I feel like that is why I did mention that I'm still learning how to have boundaries, and I'm still, for me, when that first happened to me, I tried to go back to my faith, and I tried to understand if there was any text or any any shloka or any story that I could find some comfort in, to tell me that it wasn't wrong to pick different side and to go forward with it. But time and time again, I still go back and I'm like, oh wait, am I doing the right thing? And like I mentioned earlier, it's really hard. It's still really hard for me to realize that if there are two choices, not one of them is the best and not one of them is the worst. Like, it is what you choose to do. And honestly, having that conversation with my parents hasn't really gone that well for me, so I can't really give much advice on how that how that worked for me. But for me, reading the Bhagavad Gita, especially like right between the edge of chapter 1 and chapter 2, when Arjuna is having the same problem, choosing between this side of the family and that side of the family, like that's something I related to, and I try to seek comfort in. But if anybody else has anything to share, I would love to hear. So thank you.
And I think it's important. Like, the reason I'm asking this question is I think a lot of households can also relate to this. Are you gaslighting your child without even realizing it? Are you emotionally tormenting your child by having them make choices? And I know Haripriya kind of touched on this too, like this way or that way, where if you don't follow your parents, then the kid carries that guilt, and so it's definitely something I've struggled with. It's something I've addressed in therapy, and for me, I think, again, the dialectical thinking really helped, as well as, what is the fact and then what is the belief. And by it kind of like splitting a whole, thinking process into fact, belief, and feeling, it really helped. So any other advice would be great.
I have one thing to add. I think one of the long-term results of that kind of gaslighting type behavior is that a person learns to gaslight themselves. I, for the longest of times, thought, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just function? Why can't I just do what my parents say? I didn't trust my own feelings. I shut myself off from it, and I just learned to abuse myself, be like, what the hell's wrong with me? Why am I thinking these things? And I would spiral really badly. And I didn't seek out help for the longest of time because of that, because it's like, oh, I'm just weak. Like, you're weak. Why are you complaining about this? Why are you crying? And that's what really led me to such a dark place. So, when it comes to love and seeing the other person for who they are, that also means accepting their emotion. And I frankly believe that my parents weren't able to handle my emotions when I was younger. If I was crying or if I felt upset, they would react because they didn't want to deal with that emotion of that child, because it would trigger something within them. So I think the big thing about parents is that yes, a lot of parents do things out of love, but frankly, we all have dark parts in ourselves. And we need to look inside and see what that darkness within us is getting triggered that makes us say, no, you can't feel anger. You can't feel sadness. What's wrong with you? Because otherwise that gets thrown onto our kids, and the darkness just persists in a way.
Haripriya, you have any thoughts or questions before we move on?
Yeah, I was just going to add that personally, I haven't faced it. Definitely many of my students do. And the way I, as an educator, sort of deal with it is I sit down one-on-one with each of my students. I usually have like 40 students, but I still take that time to sit down with them and understand where they're coming from, what makes them go. And the kind of sad part is that when I ask them what they're passionate about, sometimes they just don't have an answer to that because their parents have been making those decisions for them. But the way I sort of deal with it, and the way I think parents maybe can also do the sort of similar thing, is I keep on asking, what do you do in your free time? And then I do the exact same thing as my parents, oh my goodness, that's so amazing, I could never do that, can you please teach me? And I'm still maintaining that position of authority. They know that they can come to me and I will teach them best computer science principles ever, but they also realize that they can teach me something. So I just want to quote a Khalil Gibran poem that my parents have always believed in on children, just a few lines, but they come through you, but not from you. They give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls.
Excellent, excellent. Balu, you have gone through this from two sides, from you being a first-generation Indian American kid and now as a parent. You have any thoughts on what worked for you and what are you doing that helps?
Yeah, I mean, we could go on for hours. I'm sure all of us could, right? There are, being the first representative of Indian Americans doing spelling in the United States brought with it some really great things, but also some responsibilities, right? And so, getting to that place was kind of a love-hate situation because it's something I wanted, but it's something that my parents both pushed and supported, right? And it went well. But then after that, right, there was an expectation from the community, right, of okay, you're now our community's representative, and that carries with it a lot of responsibility. So fortunately for me, that worked out, but I can't tell you from our peer group, right? So people my age, the number of folks that came to me and said, I hate you. And I'm like, well, this is the first time we're meeting. How can you hate me? Well, because my parents have compared me to you for so long, right? And so,
Yes.
That's not an easy place to live. And in general, we figured out a way to do that dance. But so in my youth, that's kind of what I contended with, and understanding that kind of tiger parent mentality, the immigrant mentality, and then what peers will do to you, right? If that's the situation in which you're thrust. Sorted that out without, too much drama. But on the parental front, I was definitely both pushed and supported. And over time, that notion of gaslighting dissipated because a lot of trust was earned. So my parents started to, give me more opportunity to do things. And one of the biggest things I did, they started a family business, and I started helping out with it. And they listened to me enough that I was able to contribute, and that turned into increasing trust to the point now, right? I'm now almost 50. My dad turned 80. My mom turned 75 yesterday. And simple things, right? With now health issues and my dad wanting to go and do his responsibilities at the temple, he'll literally text me and say, is it safe? Can I go or can I not? Right? And I'll wear a mask and I'll do this and this, but I'm not going if you're not going to allow it, right? And so that can improve over time, but it really takes a lot of kind of one step up, one step back, eventually two steps up, one step back into a place, right, where I had to appreciate when my parents were right and acknowledge it, and they had to appreciate when I was right and acknowledge it. And hopefully we can all get to a place where we can both be vulnerable enough, right, for those acknowledgments, and that takes time. A few other things over time, many years later, having kids, I married a woman who grew up in India, right? So my kids have one second generation person and then an immigrant parent. But one of the things that we've really tried to do is if we're encouraging them to do music, for example, my wife will she joined class with them. And so she does music with them, doesn't just push them to do it. We had my kids get their thread ceremony like I did, but I actually now at least a couple of times a week will sit and do it with them. And so my kids will come to me and say, what time can you do it with me tomorrow? But also we'll go to baseball games together or go and play basketball together. And so we're not delivering a message of you must do. It's I expect you to do the following things, but we're going to do the following things together. And so maintaining culture is really important, but we're going to do that together. Similarly, we're going to go to a concert together and or we're going to play sports together. So the things that they want to do, we try to make sure that we have made time to do it, because if it's a unidirectional message of you must do, then I think that balance of interaction is off, and then there's no opportunity, right, to earn trust. I think the final thing that I'll reference is, this is not easy, right, for anyone, and I think that Shivam and others have referenced this in times past, and you referenced this earlier, Dr. Kaipa, which is, no matter what you've learned, right, being a parent, that's your first time, and being a child, it's your first time. And one of the most challenging situations we faced was when my older son decided that he wanted to pursue the spelling bee. And so he made this decision on his own. We did not push him for it. But as time went on, right, for him to do well, there were certain things he had to do differently and better. Well, when we tell him that and it doesn't work, right, then everybody loses their patience and everyone loses their cool. So how do you encourage someone to do something that they want to achieve where it's going to risk creating collateral damage, but not saying anything risks that individual not succeeding when they want to succeed? That is the conundrum of both parent and child. And, you know, we certainly always did our best to have cooler heads, but sometimes we didn't, right? We all got tired, especially as those times turned into years. But when we do that as parents, one of the most important things we always remember is, okay, when things calm down, are we going to go back and make sure that the child remembers that no matter what the outcome is, right, it's back to that Gita quote. We all have a responsibility to try our best, right? But the outcome doesn't matter. It would be great if it's the outcome we were hoping for, but if it isn't the outcome we're hoping for, right, we're still, you know, very much loving each other, and, you know, it doesn't define the individual. The outcome doesn't define any of us. The journey helps define all of us, but the outcome never actually defines us.
Thank you, Dr. Balu. One interesting question that came up is, what about LGBT issue? Is that something that you addressed, or you have friends, or you have certain experiences that might throw some light on to help both the children as well as the parents who are struggling to communicate about this? Either, any of you panelists?
Sorry,
Well,
could you go ahead? Go ahead, actually.
Go ahead, Yashu.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Kaipa. So as you know, I am a coach and I do work with, you know, different members of the Desi community and the LGBTQ, non-binary, all of these different concepts do come up in my conversations with my clients. And I think the most important thing is for our parents to have a broader mindset of acceptance, right? And this can be hard, especially when you have parents who are very fixated in their mindset. And that's when, you know, this effort to convince them or this effort to get their approval can be very difficult and detrimental. And those are moments where we say, you know, you need to draw boundaries, because sexuality, these kinds of things are not changeable, right? They're not easy for you to just rip off, right? That's who you are, that's your identity. So I think for me, when it comes to parents who are trying to build a relationship with their child, of course, this can be hard because they might be coming from a background where any type of culture or, you know, LGBTQ communities were always dismissed or discouraged even, right? Or even, you know, seen in a darker light. So for parents who may have that mentality or grew up with that mentality, asking yourself, like, ultimately, how do you see your child? Your child, like, do you see this person as just a person, as something that doesn't carry any other value other than their gender or identity? Do you see this person or this person as, this is my offspring, this is my child, this is someone I gave birth to, this is someone I choose to love, right? Life is all about choices. When you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And that's something I always tell my clients, like, what are you choosing at the end of the day? It's a process. It's not going to be an overnight, you know, you wake up and you're suddenly like, oh, I love my gay child. No, but it's something where you can first educate yourself, right? As a parent, you can try to make steps towards understanding them, try to make steps towards saying, hey, like, I know this is going to be hard. I'm uncomfortable by the fact that you're this way, but I love you. And giving your child the assurance that they are loved, that their identity is not going to mess up anything or make them feel undervalued or even unloved, right? Making sure you're giving them assurance, I love you, but I need to learn to get used to this. I never grew up with this. Being transparent as parents, I'm scared. I'm scared because there's a taboo that comes from our culture that if you are gay, you will get AIDS. I am scared of hearing these things from cinema, this, that, right? So even being transparent, and then your child saying, hey, well, this is scary for me too, Mom. So why don't we both figure out, why don't we both find out medical resources? Why don't we both have this conversation together? So that's kind of my approach.
Thank you, Yashu. Shivam, you were about to say something. What do you have to share about this topic?
I was asking what the question was. Sorry about that.
Okay.
This is Ratnam. Can I make a comment?
Yeah, please.
Okay. It's a different comment. When I was listening, first I would like to say all these panelists, they're stars. I think we should recognize that. We should appreciate. They are stars, in my opinion. Right? And when I was listening to it, through my own experiences of life, I see we're talking about generational gap between generation 1, generation 2. But there are other gaps. We need to address that. That is, even if you take, let's say, parents that came from India, right? They grew up in what? In a, let's call, for a lack of a better term, dharmic life, right? So we are supposed to follow dharmic life. But do we follow? We don't. There's a gap. There's a gap between what we're supposed to for our civilization for the last 5,000 years, whatever it is, right? And we have a gap. We don't meet those standards. We say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, Sarve Jana Sukhuno Bhavantu, right? There are some slokas, Bhagavad Gita. So we don't. There is a gap between what we were to do, what we actually do. There's a gap. And that's a big gap. Similarly, there's a gap between children, what a ideal child ought to be versus what they do, right? Let me give an example. In the US example, with the COVID-19, if everybody followed golden rule, right? We all know golden rule, so I don't want to repeat it. If we follow the golden rule, we stayed 21 days at home, the whole planet, would have been wonderful. So that means even we didn't follow the golden rule. Let's forget about India. It's about West. The Western civilization, they all talk about the golden rule. And they did not follow. Even today, that 40% of people say, I don't want a vaccination.
Okay.
There's certain segment of people say,
I think we should focus on the topic right now. Maybe we'll talk about the golden rule later. Can we come back to the topic of bridging the generation gap?
Yeah, I understand. But without
I understand.
Those two gaps,
appreciate it. Yeah.
This gap will not be fully fulfilled. So we need to address that in the long term, the other gaps. So we had to work on all of them so that you get an integrated solution at the end of the day.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's my point. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So you have, one of the last questions I also have is, as panelists, do you each of you as second generation people have your own opinions. Do you think you are always right and parents had to learn? What did you learn from your parents and what do you appreciate about your parents that has helped you a lot? Can you each give one suggestion and one comment about what did you appreciate your parents and what is one suggestion you have for them? Can we go around? Like maybe we'll start with Haripriya, and then we'll go in reverse this time, and then we'll ask Savita to make some comments as well. Haripriya.
Yeah, what I appreciate most about my parents and what I really need to learn from them is they never say no. They always sort of continue. So I can tell you, I didn't always want to be an engineer. When I was younger, like kindergarten, first grade, I wanted to be an archaeologist. I loved Egypt. I loved pyramids. I loved mummies. I loved all that. So my mom, knowing me, she never said, oh my goodness, honey, you are a Cleopatra, you are a princess, you cannot go out in there in the hot, you're vegetarian, like it's not the life for you. She knew that, but she didn't tell me. Had she said that, like, hey, no, this is off limits for you, this profession, the first thing I would have done is I would have majored in that and I would have been miserable with my life. Instead, she's like, okay, Haripriya, if this is what you're interested in. She got books from the library, she got documentaries, and I learned how to, read and write hieroglyphs, which is the Egyptian, handwriting. I made my own cartouche, which is a stone tablet. I wrote my own name in hieroglyphs, and I did everything. But the more I, learned about these archaeologists, I learned about the King Tut curses and the scorpions and everything, I myself realized, this is not the profession for me. So my mom never said anything about, don't do this. She just brought me the resources, and I realized it myself that, yep, this isn't for me. Engineering, sitting in the comfort of my home coding is more my thing.
Thank you. That's an excellent learning. Okay, and Sravya?
I think for me, it's the same thing, the other end of the stick. I think I'm really, really amazed at how my parents have kept that culture going, and how they've managed to still have me so passionate about the culture, and how passionate about and building relationships with our with my grandparents and how they managed that. I always wonder if I had kids, I don't know if I could really be able to do that. Because I think that's pretty hard. I think they also had to fight a lot of battles within their own social circle to go forward with that, because I think when when their peers came here, a lot of them assimilated much more to the culture here, and they're like, oh, why don't you do this and why don't you do that? And I think it took a lot from them to stand their ground and keep it moving forward.
Thank you. And Shivam? Sorry, Yashu and then Shivam. Sorry.
Gosh, I feel like I have made so many mistakes in my life. And at the same time, I feel like I have learned so much from my parents, from credit card spending to alcohol and drugs and all of that. Yes, maybe their techniques were not maybe the best, because most of the time it was fear tactics. It still gave me discipline when it came to these kinds of things, right? I didn't abuse them, and I understood the risks that came with a lot of these different practices. So in that aspect, although their methods may not have been, what we commonly see with American culture, at the end of the day, I turned out great. And I tell my mom this all the time. I say, Amma, I turned out great. Akka turned out great. You don't have to keep babying us because you've raised us to be beautiful, accomplished women. Right. And I think, being a woman, my sister is a doctor. She's a surgeon. I'm a doctor on the other kind of doctor, and people always say, in my family, we are the doctors, right? Nobody else in my entire family are doctors other than my father. So the fact that they gave us that power, the fact that they pushed us to accomplish this much, and today have that title to allow us to earn money and be protected, I think is so valuable. I've hated on my parents sometimes, saying, you put me in this career that I hate. I wanted to become a school teacher and you forced me into this. But now I look back and I say every grain of rice that I eat is a sacrifice that my parents made, and I'm here where I am. And so that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Beautifully expressed. Shivam?
Yeah, the topic of my parents is quite difficult. I'll focus on my father. It's been interesting as I go through therapy. I realize that I'm very much like my dad in many ways, and I always kind of viewed him as a horrible person when I was growing up. I really didn't have a good relationship with him, and I think after going to college, I started kind of coming to terms with him. And as I've grown to show kindness to myself, I also realized I had so many patterns that he'd passed on. And I've also taken some time to explore his history from what he's told me, what little he's told me, because he's kind of a private man. But I think I realize he's a good man. He's a good man. I honestly, I was kind of questioning whether he'd be on this call. If he is listening, I want him to know that he's a good man. I really care about him. And he did teach me a lot of very good things. Yeah, I don't speak with him right now, but I do intend to reestablish connection. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the authenticity and honesty each four of the panelists have shown is really amazing in that respect. I also found there are three gaps. Of course, in my own situation, it is the same thing. As a father of 30-year-old kids, I also look at, I travel too much. I focused on the good things, but I also focused on their security. Out of my commitment to they getting good jobs, they commit, will they be able to do very well? Can they do this? And they need to focus on earning the money. They need to take responsibility. In that process, I found out that what I said was more from my fear, and I projected my fear on my children, and that created some issues for me and for them as well. So one of the biggest gaps I found is, can I share my fears rather than my solutions to those fears? I think that is one of the biggest things I'm learning from each of you. So maybe if I share my fears and concerns, like Yashu said, if I can say, hey, I'm worried about if you are gay, the AIDS and all other kinds of things, I don't know how to deal with them. Are you safe? See, that takes a lot more courage for me to say. So that means one is between what I am saying and what I am doing. I think that is one thing Haripriya also brought up. Can I bridge the gap between my words and my actions? Maybe I should use more of my actions to share my thoughts rather than my words first, and then show up that I'm actually a hypocrite. I'm not following my own words. That would be terrible. So first, my ability, my credibility with my children is based on my practicing what I preach. Second is between what I think and feel and what I say to them. So that means, do I have a commitment to their well-being, not just they looking good according to my culture, to my relatives, or to my society? So that means, can I actually commit to their well-being? Like again, some of you mentioned, each of you, like Shivam, when you talk about the trauma or PTSD kind of symptoms, or when you talk about gaslighting, Sravya and Yashu, or when Haripriya gave some examples of how they shared actually their feelings and they shortened the time for you to learn, like if you want to be an archaeologist, how they help you to come to the decision yourself and take responsibility for your decision rather than making the decision for them. So that is commitment to your own growth, not commitment to me being right and I making the decision for you, not giving you a chance. The third one is between who I am to what I do, the courage. Can I actually deal with my own fears, my own insecurities about culture, propagation of this one, being Indian versus being American? How do I fit in? Like, I think one of you gave a suggestion saying earlier, how much am I committed and connecting to other people outside Indian American community? Am I actually growing up only with best friends all coming from Indian American community? Do I participate in my community a lot? Do I participate a lot in outside of my comfort zone? I think those are some things that will build courage. So three things which I'm taking are credibility by practicing, commitment by actually looking at you and your commitment, not giving you advice. Third is courage to confront my own fears and insecurities and being vulnerable in front of you, just like four of you have been vulnerable in front of us, might make some connections closer based on what I have heard. Savita, do you have any thoughts on, you are a mother of two kids and you have gone through a lot of things yourself. You have any thoughts on that? There are no specific big questions that have come in.
So you go ahead, Savita, just 1 minute, that we have already hit the 90-minute mark. So
Okay.
we would start winding up. So sorry, right. Savita, go ahead.
So listening to all the panelists, I'm beyond proud of all of you for being so candid about your experiences. I think each one of you are amazing, irrespective of what your experiences have been. You've come out strong, and that's what we would want to see as parents. But while listening to you guys, I was thinking about what it was to be at your age, growing up growing up in a very protected family, right? I never was allowed to even go 5 miles far off, to a school. But then my parents found that it was okay to get me married to a guy that I had no clue who he was. I had probably met him for like 20 minutes and then shipped me off to to the US, so new country, new school, new husband. I knew nobody over here. And I think the lack of support system, being transported like this entire culture shock and everything, I had to learn on the job what it is to be a wife, what it is to be like, on my own without, my parents being there. So obviously you do make a lot of mistakes. Your emotional intelligence is compromised at that point because you don't have the guidance. And then obviously when my kids were born, new parent, right? I don't have the support system. My mom was here for a couple months maybe. So again, learning on the job and trying to do the best I could. But every time there was a fear that gripped me, it was like, oh my God, will my parents approve if I make this decision for my child? And it took a very long time for me to get past that. So I think while you guys all have your experiences with your parents, it would be great for you also to have some sort of dialogue to see what it was for them to be at your age and the kind of challenges that they faced. I was not a tiger mom, but I definitely put a lot of emphasis on competition and education and things like that. And it took a few years for my son to actually voice and say, I always think you're so perfect. You had a distinction and you got a distinction and, in your engineering, and you always are able to do all these things. And he opened my eyes to the fact that share your failures with your children so they don't feel like, they're constantly having to live up to these really high expectations. So I think for the most part, well, I know I've made a lot of mistakes, but I'm learning a lot from my kids, and they're teaching me what it is to be happy. Like I think when my boys were going through very, very tough times in the last couple of years, my younger one, he was a teenager, he still is a teenager. He said, the only thing I want from life is to be happy. He actually said that over the phone to my brother, and I was shocked. That is the first time I actually understood what is it that these kids are valuing, and what are the lessons that they're teaching us. So I hope all your parents are watching. I hope like a ton of parents are watching this amazing panelist. And I hope you guys come back and share your experiences, because you have no idea how much you are impacting the parenting styles of all the people watching. And all of us want to do so much more and want to be better parents only because of the conversations we've had with you guys today. So thank you.
Thank you, Savita, for such inspiring words. And as you said, I mean, the panelists have done outstanding job today. I am actually going to really see whether there is a way in which my kids can see this. I can use this video as a conversation opener to deal with some of the topics that we have not dealt with, and raise some of the issues that I have, so that I can actually clear those kinds of, clear the air between me and my children. So you guys, 4 of you, have done such an amazing job of representing yourself, and we're really proud of you. And thank you for all your contributions. And by the way, if you are one of the listeners, check out the handouts, because as Yashu said, irrespective of her PhD in mechanical science and engineering parts, she actually does some work on coaching, fitness, body size, various kinds of things. Similarly, Haripriya has mentioned she has Mehta Plus kinds of things that she does. And Shivam talks about and is interested in psychology, education, culture, some of the things. He has his own work he does. And Sravya is the coordinator for youth in the Samskrita Bharati, and she teaches classes on various aspects of Sanskritam as well as other things. You might want to contact some of them. And there are not any questions really that actually we need to talk about. I have not found anything. They are appreciating all the comments that I have seen, are really appreciating each one of you. And as you know, concluding this part, what I'm saying is that we have started this series. We had 2 sessions so far. One, we listened from the parents, their concerns about children. Now we have heard from the second generation Indian Americans, you, about what are your experiences growing up in America as the Desi, and your suggestions to your contemporaries as well as parents. Maybe in the next session, which we will have in a couple of months, we will have some parents, you know, and their children. Maybe a couple of parents and a couple of children can have some conversation, and then we can actually take it to next level. So we are interested in continuing the series of increasing the communication between first generation and second generation, and deal with the emotional issues, trauma, increase the well-being, and increase the relationship and the love that some of you talked about. We want to increase that. And if you have any ideas, if you have suggestions, if you want to participate or volunteer, as Desi said, please contact him. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart for all the teachings that you have done. So you may be young in age, but you are wise in your comments. Thank you for the gift that you have given to all of us. Namaste. And Deshi, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Each of the panelists are, I can't call you youngsters anymore. You are the teachers for us now. And over the last 90 minutes, I felt I have been slapped several times. And of course, a few times you patted me on the shoulder too, but I wish we had all known when we are young parents. Now it's too late for us. So the young parents who are listening to it now have a chance to make it right, to do a better job and bring up a great one. Like Dr. Kaipa said, we intend to continue this topic until we hit the nail on the board and make it work. So please stay tuned, and we will be come back. And like Savita said, you guys, we will call on you again in future to come back and talk to us again. And thank you.
Maybe we can do larger workshops, not just the webinars.
Yes, so many, workshops or extended class kind of things, and all those things. We will think of different ways of doing it. But this is really excellent get group of thing we got in. And so we thank each and every one of you. Thank you for all the audience for participating and then coming and encouraging us to do such things for the benefit of the community. We will have our normal webinar in 2 weeks from today. Again, there is a college counselor going to talk to the parents about how to support your kids' interest, not your interest, but your kids' interest. So please join us, and then we will continue this dialogue in future. Thank you, Shivam, Yashu, Haripriya, and Sravya. Thanks for your time and your candid and open honesty. And that's a very rarity, I can find. So
thank you, Balu Garu.
Thank you, Dr. Kaipa, Dr. Balu.
Congratulations, everyone.
Thank you.
And Dr. Chituri, everybody. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.